A single fire could save an entire civilization from ruin. Ancient beacon networks moved urgent messages faster than any army could march, using chains of flame to span continents in hours. By the end of this story, you will understand the brilliant engineering and human drama behind history's first high-speed communication system. We will uncover how these signals were coded and why they were so vulnerable to the weather. What does it truly take to build a nervous system for an empire? Long before the first stone tower was built, the human voice could only carry so far. Runners grew tired, drumbeats faded into the hills, and a single puff of smoke vanished on the wind. These early methods were deeply personal, but they were prisoners of the landscape, easily broken by a storm or a mountain range. The true breakthrough came not from invention, but from observation. Someone, somewhere, watched a distant wildfire rage across a hilltop, its glow visible for miles in the dark. In that terrifying spectacle, they saw a possibility. What if that fire was not a random act of nature, but a deliberate message? That simple, profound shift in thinking transformed fire from a source of warmth and danger into a tool for conversation. It meant a warning could now leap across valleys, traveling faster than any human ever could. This primal need to shout across the distance, to protect a community from an approaching threat, is what fueled the creation of the first organized signal fires. From the watchtowers of ancient China to the mountain peaks of Greece, cultures independently began to elevate their fires, literally raising their voices above the noise of the world. They were learning that a single, strategically placed flame could speak to the horizon. This was the critical evolutionary step, the moment a solitary bonfire became part of a chain. It was a revolutionary leap in human connection, setting the stage for the intricate, continent-spanning networks that would one day flicker into life. A single flame on a distant hilltop was not a solitary cry. It was a single word in a sentence spoken across a continent. To understand how these sentences were formed, we must look at the anatomy of the beacon chain itself. This was not a collection of random campfires. It was a meticulously engineered system, a machine built from fire, stone, and human vigilance. Each component had to be perfect for the message to fly true. The first and most critical element was location. Beacon stations were always placed on the highest ground available, a hill or a mountain peak. This was not for dramatic effect. It was a matter of pure geometry. The station needed an unobstructed line of sight to the next station in the chain. If you could see their fire, they could see yours. This clear visual path was the only wire in this ancient network. These stations were more than just piles of wood. They were often fortified structures, small stone towers or platforms built to withstand the weather and offer some protection for the watchmen. Inside, a constant supply of dry, fast-burning fuel was kept ready at all times. Tinder, resinous wood, and sometimes even special oils were stockpiled to ensure a fire could be lit instantly, blazing bright and high into the night sky. The watchmen themselves were the living, breathing components of this machine. Their job was one of extreme patience and immediate action. They would spend days, weeks, even months watching the horizon for a glimmer of light, a job defined by long stretches of boredom punctuated by moments of immense urgency. The core principle that made it all work was relay. A signal was not just observed, it was repeated. The moment a watchman saw the specific pattern of flames from the previous station, his own hands would fly into action. He would ignite his own prepared pyre, sending the exact same message racing onward to the next watchful eye down the line. This created a wave of light, a visual current that flowed from hilltop to hilltop. The message itself did not travel at the speed of a running man or even a galloping horse. It traveled at the speed of a man lighting a fire, a wave that could span hundreds of miles in a single night. But how did a simple fire say anything more complex than "look over here"? The answer lay in code. The specific pattern of the flames held the meaning. Perhaps a single, steady fire meant all was well, a signal of peace. Two fires burning side by side might mean a warning, an enemy sighted. Three could signal a call to assemble the army. This was a simple, robust language of light and shadow, a binary system long before the invention of the computer. It was a language every watchman had to memorize, a language where a mistake could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. This entire physical infrastructure, from the strategic placement of the towers to the coded language of the flames, was what gave these networks their astonishing speed and reliability. But just how fast were they? To truly grasp their power, we need to put a number to that speed. That signal could cross an empire in the time it took a single messenger to saddle his horse. The true power of these networks was not just communication, but the gift of time itself. Consider the sheer physical disparity in speed. A mounted courier on a swift horse, pushing the animal to its limits, might cover 50 miles in a single day. An entire army with its supply wagons and foot soldiers was a lumbering giant managing a mere 10 to 15 miles daily. Now, place that against the speed of a beacon chain. A warning fire, once lit, traveled at a pace limited only by human reaction. A watchman sees a flame, he lights his own. This process might take a minute, maybe two. In that brief span, the message has already leaped to the next hilltop, 5 or 10 miles away. Over a long chain, this meant the signal moved at an effective speed that was, for all practical purposes, instantaneous. A message could fly from a distant border to the heart of a capital in a single night. This created a temporal chasm, a gap of days or even weeks between the arrival of the news and the arrival of the threat. This was not a minor convenience, it was a revolution in strategic planning. A king receiving a beacon warning of an invasion from the north now had precious time. He could call his banners, muster his armies from across the realm, and move them into defensive positions long before the enemy even came into view. He could stockpile supplies, reinforce city walls, and set ambushes in mountain passes. The invading force, expecting to find a region asleep and unprepared, would instead march directly into a fully mobilized defense. The beacons did not just carry a message of danger, they carried the opportunity to prevent disaster. This temporal advantage fundamentally reshaped the nature of warfare and imperial control, turning a vast territory from a vulnerable expanse into a coordinated organism. But what happened when the weather turned against this system of light? This system reached its absolute peak with the Byzantine Empire. Picture a thin, brilliant line of fire stretching across the ancient world, from the dusty frontiers of Syria all the way to the gleaming domes of Constantinople itself. This was not a temporary measure, but a permanent, hardened nerve of the empire. Its sole purpose was to deliver a single, critical piece of information with breathtaking speed. An Arab invasion force was moving. Historical records suggest this chain could carry a warning over 450 miles in a matter of hours. To put that into perspective, a lone rider on the fastest horse would have needed days, perhaps even a week, to cover the same grueling distance. The Byzantines did not leave this vital task to chance or local villagers. The beacon network was operated by a dedicated corps of soldiers, men whose entire profession was vigilance. They were integrated directly into the military machine, a clear signal of how seriously the empire took this flowing river of light. Their stations were strategically placed fortifications, often sharing space with larger military outposts, ensuring they were manned, supplied, and defended at all times. The success of this entire apparatus hinged on two pillars: flawless organization and human discipline. Every watchman knew his place in the chain. He knew the exact meaning of the fire patterns he was to light and the specific conditions that demanded a response. There was no room for hesitation or misinterpretation. A moment's delay or a single misread signal could mean the difference between a fortified capital and a sacked city. The Byzantine beacon chain stands as a monumental achievement, a testament to how a simple technology, when executed with perfect precision, could shield a civilization from its greatest threats. But this brilliant idea was not unique to one empire. Far to the east, another ancient culture was building its own great wall of fire, facing a different kind of danger from a completely different direction. While the Byzantines faced threats from the south, a far grander and more enduring line of defense was taking shape in the east. The Great Wall of China, that iconic stone serpent winding across mountains and deserts, was so much more than a physical barrier. It was the solid spine of a colossal nervous system, a highway for information built directly into the ramparts. Every watchtower dotting its length was not just a defensive position. It was a communication node, a living cell in a vast, intelligent organism designed to protect an empire. These towers were positioned with meticulous care, each one within clear sight of the next, creating an unbroken chain of vision that stretched for thousands of miles. They were equipped with a sophisticated toolkit for sending messages. During the day, watchmen would send signals using thick columns of smoke, created by burning pre-prepared mixes of wolf dung and straw to produce a dense, dark plume that stood out against the sky. When night fell, the language changed to fire, with massive, bright blazes that could be seen for vast distances in the dark. But this system spoke in more than just simple warnings. It possessed a rudimentary vocabulary. The number of smoke columns or fires lit in sequence could convey specific intelligence. A single fire might mean a small raiding party of fewer than 100 men had been spotted. Two fires could signal a larger force, perhaps 500 strong. 3 fires might indicate an army of over 10,000, a truly massive invasion force. The system could even communicate the direction of the attack, using flags by day or different arrangements of lanterns by night to point toward the specific mountain pass or valley from which the enemy was approaching. This transformed the wall from a passive barrier into an active, responsive shield. A commander in a central fortress did not just receive a generic alarm. He received a detailed report, the size and location of the threat, all delivered in the time it took for a sequence of fires to be lit and relayed along the wall. He could then make a strategic decision, dispatching a precisely sized contingent of troops to the exact point of danger, rather than mobilizing his entire garrison for a minor raid. This elegant fusion of massive stone and flickering light created a defense that was both physically imposing and intellectually sharp, a testament to an empire that understood that information delivered fast was the ultimate weapon. Yet even these brilliant systems contained a critical weakness, one that no amount of engineering could ever fully overcome. But even the most sophisticated stone walls could not defend against the sky itself. The greatest vulnerability of every beacon network was not an enemy soldier, but a change in the weather. A thick, rolling fog could swallow a signal whole, rendering a blazing fire invisible from just a few hundred yards away. A torrential downpour could drench the fuel and douse the flames before a message ever had a chance to leap to the next hill. This was the system's fatal flaw, its complete dependence on a clear line of sight. There was no backup, no alternative path for the information to travel. If the chain was broken by a single bank of fog, the entire network fell silent, leaving a kingdom blind. This inherent fragility meant that while beacons were unparalleled in speed, they could never be the sole method of communication. They were the first, fastest alert, but they were always supported by slower, more reliable methods like mounted couriers who could carry detailed scrolls through any weather. The beacons provided the initial shout of alarm, and the runners provided the clarifying details. This layered approach recognized both the incredible power and the profound limitation of the fire on the hill. It was a technology that bound entire empires together with a thread of light, a thread that could be severed by something as simple as a cloudy night. Yet, despite this weakness, the idea was too powerful to abandon. As the medieval world took shape, this ancient tool found a new purpose in the fractured kingdoms of Europe. Across the rugged, fragmented landscapes of medieval Europe, the grand imperial chains gave way to more localized but no less vital networks. Here, kingdoms were not unified empires with central armies, but patchworks of feudal lands and independent towns. Their beacon systems reflected this decentralized world, organized by communities for their own direct protection. In England, a web of fire was woven along the coast and across prominent hilltops, a communal early warning system designed to guard against invasion from the sea. This network faced its ultimate test in the summer of 1588. When the massive Spanish armada was sighted approaching the English Channel, the order was given. From one coastal station to the next, the signal flew inland, a cascade of fire leaping from hill to hill. The message was simple and terrifying: the enemy is here. The lighting of those beacons was not just a signal, it was a national call to arms. In villages and towns far from the coast, people saw the fires on the hills and knew what they meant. Local militias, composed of farmers and tradesmen, immediately began to muster. They gathered their weapons and prepared to march toward the coast, an entire nation rallying to its own defense in a matter of hours, not days. Similar systems thrived in Scotland, France, and the lands of the Holy Roman Empire. Often, it was the local feudal lord or the town council who took responsibility for maintaining a beacon site, ensuring it was stocked with dry wood and manned by a watchful sentry. This was defense on a human scale. It was not a distant emperor commanding his legions, but a community protecting its own homes, fields, and families. The story of Europe's beacons is one of shared vigilance and collective responsibility. It reminds us that these were not cold, impersonal machines, but systems powered by the watchfulness of ordinary people who understood that the safety of all depended on the alertness of one. The fire on the hill was their shared voice, a symbol of unity against a common threat. But what happens to this ancient technology when the world changes, when new inventions promise to send messages not just across hills, but across oceans in an instant? Behind every flickering signal stood a person, a solitary figure in a stone tower, staring into an empty horizon for weeks on end. These were the Watchmen, the human anchors of the entire beacon network. Theirs was a life of profound isolation, a world defined by wind, weather, and the crushing weight of waiting. They were not just employees of the state, they were guardians of the flame, and the safety of thousands rested squarely on their shoulders. Their daily existence was governed by an unyielding routine. Each day began with the essential task of maintaining the fuel supply. They gathered and chopped wood, ensuring it was perfectly dry and ready to burn. They prepared special tinder bundles and checked stores of resin or oil, anything that would guarantee a fast, bright, unmistakable blaze the moment it was needed. Then came the watch itself. For hours, their eyes would scan the distant peaks, searching for the faintest glimmer of light or the thinnest wisp of smoke that would break the monotony. There were no distractions, no books to read, no companions to talk with, just the wind, the view, and the relentless demand for attention. The psychological toll of this duty was immense. They battled boredom, loneliness, and the constant fear of failing at the one moment that truly mattered. A moment of drowsiness, a glance away at the wrong time, a brief delay in striking the flint. Any of these small human errors could mean a message died on their hilltop. A delayed signal could leave a city unprepared for a siege. A failure to relay could mean an army marched into an ambush. The consequences of a single mistake were not abstract, they were measured in lives and the fall of kingdoms. This immense responsibility forged a culture of extreme discipline and deep loyalty. In many places, the role of watchman became a hereditary duty, passed from father to son. A family's honor was tied to the reliability of their signal fire. In military units, it was a post for the most trusted and steadfast soldiers, men who understood that their vigilance was a form of active combat. They were the first line of defense, and their weapon was a flame. To understand these networks is to remember the human spirit that powered them. The real marvel was not just the engineering of the towers or the code of the fires, but the unwavering dedication of the people who kept the watch, proving that the strongest link in any chain is not made of iron but of resolve. A single flame could only shout a warning, but a coded sequence of fires could speak in sentences. The evolution of these systems from simple alarms to nuanced communication networks hinged on the development of a language of fire, a rudimentary form of cryptography etched in light and smoke. During the day, the color and density of a smoke column carried meaning. Watchmen did not simply burn any available wood. They used specific fuels to craft their signals. Burning green wood or damp moss might produce a thin, white smoke, while a mix of resinous pine and animal fats could generate a thick, black plume that stood starkly against a blue sky. Some accounts suggest that wolf dung was prized for creating a particularly dark and persistent column. The choice was deliberate, a way to differentiate a routine signal from a critical alert, or to indicate the direction or nature of a threat. The night offered an even richer vocabulary. The most basic code was numerical, a simple count of individual fires. One blazing pyre might signal a sighting of a small scouting party. Two fires burning side by side could mean an infantry column was on the move. Three fires, the highest level of alarm, would scream that a massive army, complete with cavalry and siege engines, was approaching. But the coding could grow more sophisticated. Some systems employed a covered brazier, a metal container for the fire that could be shielded by a lid. A watchman could reveal the fire for a count, then hide it again, creating a flashing pattern, a kind of visual Morse code across the centuries. The arrangement of the fires also held meaning. A triangle of three blazes might indicate an attack from the sea, while a straight line pointed toward the direction of the enemy's advance. This ability to convey specific intelligence, not just a generic alarm, was revolutionary. A commander receiving a coded beacon signal did not just know there was danger, he knew what kind of danger he was facing and from where. He could make an informed decision, sending 100 men to handle a raid or his entire army to meet an invasion. This early information theory transformed the beacon from a frantic shout into a detailed report, compressing complex realities into a sequence of silent, brilliant symbols that could race across a continent before the sun had fully set. That silent language of light and smoke demanded a constant, roaring appetite. For a beacon to speak, it first had to be fed. the entire system, for all its strategic brilliance, was built upon a foundation of mundane, backbreaking labor, the relentless procurement and management of fuel. The Watchman's primary enemy was not an invading army, but a simple, damp chill that could render his station mute. He needed materials that would not just burn, but perform. The ideal fuel had to ignite with a single spark, resist sputtering out in a gust of wind, and project a brilliant, unmistakable signal high into the sky. This led to a sophisticated understanding of local combustibles. Dry, resinous woods like pine were prized for their fast-burning properties and tall, lively flames. In many European networks, watchmen relied on tightly bound bundles of sticks called faggots, which created a concentrated, hot fire. To amplify the effect, these bundles were often drenched in tar or animal fat, transforming them into veritable firebombs ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. In the peat-rich landscapes of the British Isles and parts of northern Europe, the dense, compacted turf was a common fuel. While peat burned with a slower, more smoldering flame ideal for producing thick, persistent smoke columns during the day, it required careful preparation and drying. The choice was never accidental. It was a deliberate engineering decision tailored to the local environment and the specific type of signal required. But securing these materials was only half the battle. The real logistical nightmare was keeping the remote hilltop stations perpetually stocked. Imagine the effort required to haul cartloads of wood, heavy sacks of peat, or barrels of sticky tar up a steep, pathless mountainside. This was grueling, continuous work, often falling to local villagers or support crews who made regular resupply trips. A station with a depleted wood pile was as useless as a tower with no watchman, a broken link in the chain. This constant physical effort to feed the fires highlights a profound truth about these ancient networks. Their legendary speed was not born from magic, but from immense, organized human labor. The brilliance of the signal was matched only by the sheer grit required to maintain it, a reminder that every flash of light that once saved a kingdom began with an axe splitting wood and a cart slowly climbing a hill. The silent language of fire could be silenced by a single gust of wind. For all their astonishing speed, these networks were held hostage by the very elements they sought to conquer. A dense, creeping fog was the most common assassin, swallowing the light from a beacon long before it could reach the next watchful eye. A torrential downpour could drench the carefully prepared fuel and extinguish a blaze in moments, while a heavy snowfall could both obscure the view and make the journey to resupply the station impossible. When the weather turned, the most advanced communication system in the ancient world was rendered utterly blind and mute, a chain of broken links. This natural vulnerability was compounded by a far more cunning threat: deliberate sabotage. An enemy did not need to storm every fortress. They only needed to capture one critical beacon station along the chain. Once in control, they could commit two devastating acts of deception. They could simply refuse to light the fire, allowing an invading army to slip past the defenses unnoticed under a veil of false safety. Or, more insidiously, they could light the beacon without cause, sending a wave of panic racing inward. Imagine the chaos in a capital city, mustering its army and fortifying its gates for an invasion that did not exist, all while the real threat approached from an entirely different, unguarded direction. This potential for psychological warfare made the beacon chains a double-edged sword. Furthermore, the message itself was a solitary shout into the void. The system was fundamentally one way. A watchman lit his fire, but he had no way of knowing if the next station down the line had seen it and relayed the message correctly. There was no confirmation of receipt, no return signal that said, "Message understood." If a station had been captured or had fallen asleep at its post, the warning died there, and the kingdom remained blissfully unaware. There was also no capacity for nuance or clarification. A beacon fire could signal an army of 10,000, but it could not say whether they were on foot or horseback, or if they were heading for the northern pass or the river valley. The message was sent, and its interpretation was left entirely to the receiver. These critical flaws meant that no empire could ever rely on beacons alone. They were always the first, fastest shout of alarm, but they were part of a layered communication strategy. That initial flash of light was immediately followed by the slower, more reliable dispatch of mounted couriers. These riders could carry detailed scrolls through any weather, confirm the authenticity of the threat, and provide the crucial details the fire could not. They were the clarifying sentence that followed the beacon's single, urgent word. This combination of blinding speed and deliberate confirmation created a robust system, one that acknowledged a profound truth. Even the most brilliant technology is only as strong as its weakest link. The silent language of fire did more than protect kingdoms. It ignited our oldest stories. Long after the watchtowers crumbled, the image of that fiery chain lived on, woven into the very fabric of mythology and legend, proving its power was as much psychological as it was practical. In the ancient Greek play Agamemnon by Aeschylus, the fall of the great city of Troy is not announced by a weary runner, but by a triumphant relay of beacon fires stretching across the Aegean Sea. The character Clytemnestra in Mycenae learns of her husband's victory not through a human messenger, but by reading the fires on the distant hills, a supernatural speed that feels almost divine. This was not just a plot device, it was a testament to how awe-inspiring this technology seemed to the ancient Greeks, a method so swift it could only belong to gods and heroes. Across the sea in the misty lands of Britain, the legends of King Arthur are anchored by the same primal signal. Beacons perched on the rugged cliffs of Cornwall were said to blaze into life at the first sight of Saxon longships, a call to arms for the Knights of the Round Table. In these tales, the fire on the hill is not merely a tool, it is a symbol of civilization itself standing against the darkness of chaos. These stories did more than entertain. They cemented the beacon as a permanent archetype in our collective mind, a universal shorthand for urgent warning, for connection across vast distances, and for the moment everything changes. They blur the line between the stone and mortar of history and the powerful truth of storytelling. The fact that this specific technology became such a potent symbol reveals a profound human truth. Our greatest inventions are never just machines. They are vessels for our fears, our hopes, and our most enduring myths. The language of fire could not be spoken in a storm. Its limitations, however, did not extinguish the core idea. The fundamental principles of the beacon chain, the relay of visual signals across a network of stations, refused to die. They simply evolved, finding new forms that could overcome the tyranny of darkness and bad weather. This evolution culminated in the late 18th century with the birth of the optical telegraph, a machine that turned entire landscapes into a giant mechanical signaling device. The most famous of these was the Chap semaphore system in France. Instead of a single flame, its towers were crowned with a pair of massive, movable wooden arms, controlled by an operator using a system of levers and pulleys. Each distinct position of these arms corresponded to a specific number or code in a dedicated codebook. A message was spelled out not with fire, but with the angles of these giant arms, a language of geometry visible across miles in broad daylight. This was a monumental leap forward. The semaphore system broke free from the night. It could operate as long as there was enough light to see, pushing through conditions that would have silenced a beacon chain. A skilled operator could send a complex message, a detailed sentence or a list of numbers from one tower to the next, with each station faithfully reproducing the signal and passing it along the line. The speed was breathtaking. A message could travel the hundreds of miles from Paris to Lille in a matter of minutes. This was not a new invention. It was the direct descendant of the ancient beacon. The strategic placement of towers on high ground, the reliance on a clear line of sight, the disciplined corps of operators, and the core concept of a relay, all of these were refined echoes of the old Watchmen and their fires. The semaphore was the beacon chain perfected for an age of engineering and precision. And just as the beacon paved the way for the semaphore, this mechanical marvel itself created the conceptual foundation for the next great revolution. The electrical telegraph did not emerge from a vacuum. It inherited the idea of a coded message flying across a network, the very idea that was first proven possible by a flickering line of fire on a distant hill. The journey from a solitary flame to a click in a wire was not a series of disconnected leaps, but a continuous evolutionary climb. That fire on the hill was a message for the enemy as much as for the king. The psychological power of these networks was a weapon in itself, turning a simple flame into a tool of morale that could unify a nation and unnerve an invading force. For the people living under their protection, the sudden eruption of light across the dark horizon was a visceral, community-wide experience. It was not a secret dispatch for the eyes of generals alone. It was a public declaration, a shared moment of truth that transformed abstract fear into collective action. A farmer in his field, a blacksmith at his forge, a mother in her home, all could look up and see the chain of fire blazing to life. In that instant, they knew their world had changed. The call to arms was not a distant rumor, it was right there, written in fire across the sky. This created an immediate and powerful sense of shared purpose. Every able-bodied person knew their role, whether it was to take up a weapon, secure the village, or support the militia. The beacon did not just warn them, it connected them, forging a tangible bond of collective security against the common threat. For an invading army, however, the same sight was a chilling omen. Their greatest tactical advantage, the element of surprise, was being systematically dismantled before their eyes. A commander leading his troops through a foreign valley would see the fires spring to life on the ridge ahead, then the next and the next, a wave of light racing inexorably toward the enemy heartland. He knew that with every hilltop that flared, his own window of opportunity was slamming shut. The defenders were no longer sleeping. They were awake, they were warned, and they were waiting. This knowledge could sow doubt and demoralize even the most disciplined soldiers, turning a confident advance into a cautious, anxious march into the teeth of a prepared defense. The beacon fire thus became far more than a signal. It was a profound symbol of resistance and unity. It was a flame that burned in the hearts of the people as much as on the hilltops, a constant, visible reminder that they were not isolated individuals, but part of a greater whole, bound together by a common watchfire against the darkness. The silent stones on these lonely hilltops have stories to tell. Modern archaeology is the key that unlocks their long-held secrets, transforming ancient legends of fire and signal into tangible scientific fact. This is not a search for treasure, but a meticulous reconstruction of a lost nervous system. The investigation begins not with a shovel, but with a map. Researchers first analyze the topography, searching for high points that offer a clear line of sight to the next potential station. This principle of intervisibility is the foundational rule, the same one the original builders used. If you cannot see the next hill, you cannot send a signal. These vantage points become the primary targets for exploration. When excavations begin, the earth itself starts to speak. Archaeologists might uncover the leveled foundation of a stone platform, a deliberate construction designed to give a watchman a stable, elevated perch. They find patterns of post holes telling impressions in the soil that once held sturdy timber poles, perhaps for hanging a lantern or supporting a massive iron basket for the fire. Most telling of all are the layers upon layers of ash and charcoal, the accumulated residue of countless signal fires lit over decades or even centuries. This is the physical proof of the watchman's endless vigil. In recent years, this detective work has been supercharged by technology like LiDAR. This system uses laser pulses from aircraft to map the ground surface with incredible precision, effectively digitally stripping away dense forest canopy that has hidden the land for generations. From the air, what once looked like a simple wooded hill might reveal the distinct geometric outline of a man-made platform, completely invisible from the ground. This has led to the discovery of countless previously unknown beacon sites, especially in the once heavily wooded landscapes of Europe, rewriting our understanding of how extensive these networks truly were. By carefully piecing together this scattered evidence, archaeologists can perform a remarkable feat. They can map an entire extinct communication network. They can trace the ghostly lines of sight from one confirmed site to the next, understanding the strategic logic behind the chain and confirming the grand scale described in historical chronicles. This scientific sleuthing does more than just confirm old stories. It gives voice back to the silent sentinels, proving that the fire on the hill was not just a myth, but a meticulously engineered reality. Every flicker of light in that ancient network came with a price. Building and maintaining a continent-spanning beacon system was a massive economic undertaking, a constant drain on the treasury of any kingdom or empire. This was not a project funded by spare change. It represented a conscious, strategic decision by the state to invest a significant portion of its wealth into a single, vital asset: security. The initial construction costs alone were staggering. Skilled laborers had to be hired and dispatched to remote, often treacherous locations to quarry stone, cut timber, and raise fortified towers on windswept peaks. These were not simple bonfire pits, they were engineered structures built to last, and their price tag reflected that permanence. Once the towers stood, the real, ongoing expenses began. A network of stone is useless without the people to animate it. The watchmen stationed along the chain were not volunteers. They were paid professionals, soldiers or dedicated civil servants whose wages, food, and shelter were a permanent line item in the imperial budget. Their provisioning required its own miniature supply chain, with carts and porters regularly making difficult journeys to these isolated outposts. Then there was the fuel itself, the lifeblood of the system. The endless demand for dry wood, resinous pine, animal fats, and specialized tinder created an entire industry dedicated to feeding the fires. Local forests were managed for this purpose, and the complex logistics of harvesting, processing, and transporting these heavy, bulky materials to the high mountains required a small army of woodcutters, carters, and logistics overseers. For an ancient treasurer, the bill for a single beacon chain would have been a formidable scroll of expenses, from the wages of the watchman on the hill to the cost of the axe that cut his firewood. This massive investment offers us a profound insight into the minds of ancient rulers. The decision to fund such a system was a clear statement of priorities. It declared that the ability to know of a threat instantly, to gain that precious gift of time, was worth the price of raising and supplying a small, distributed army whose only weapon was a flame. The economic footprint of these networks reveals a fundamental truth about historical states. Their administrative capabilities and their deepest fears are etched into their ledgers. They were willing to allocate scarce resources, the very lifeblood of their kingdoms, not just on swords and walls, but on a nervous system of light, proving they understood that information was the ultimate defense. That single, urgent fire on the hill was never just a signal, it was a trigger, and a misfire could be catastrophic. The very simplicity that gave beacon networks their speed also made them dangerously susceptible to a timeless human flaw: error. A lonely watchman, straining his eyes for weeks on end, could easily misinterpret a distant forest fire, a flash of summer lightning, or even the cooking fire of a distant shepherd's camp as the official signal. In that moment of misjudgment, his hand would strike the flint, and a lie would become a truth, racing across the kingdom. The consequences of this single mistake rippled outward with devastating efficiency. Villages would empty as militias scrambled to their mustering points. Armies would be roused from their barracks and begin long, arduous marches toward a phantom enemy. Precious supplies stockpiled for a real emergency would be consumed. The financial cost of a single false mobilization could drain a local treasury. But the greater damage was to trust itself. A commander who had rushed his forces to a false alarm would be far more hesitant the next time the fires blazed. He might delay, question the signal, or even ignore it altogether, creating a fatal opening for a real enemy. This was the ancient cry of wolf dilemma, weaponized on an imperial scale. The vulnerability was not limited to honest mistakes. The system was open to deliberate sabotage. An enemy agent, having infiltrated or captured a single beacon station, could light the fire without cause. This act of psychological warfare could send a kingdom into a frenzy of misplaced defense, exhausting its soldiers and scattering its armies, all while the true invasion force slipped in through an unguarded back door. To combat this inherent fragility, empires imposed draconian discipline. Watchmen faced severe punishments, even execution, for negligence. Elaborate verification protocols were established where possible. Perhaps a beacon signal required confirmation from a second, nearby station before it was relayed. More often, the initial flash of fire was just that, an initial alert. It was immediately followed by the dispatch of a mounted courier, a secondary messenger who could confirm the threat, assess its scale, and provide the details the fire could not. This layered approach acknowledged a sobering reality. The fastest message in the world was useless if it could not be trusted. The brilliance of the beacon chain was forever tempered by the fallible human hand that held the torch. That ancient technology of fire and warning did not remain confined to the old world. It sailed across the Atlantic with the first European colonists, a tool of survival transplanted into a vast and unfamiliar wilderness. In places like New England, the dense forests and sprawling coastlines presented a new kind of vulnerability. Isolated settlements, often miles apart, faced threats from rival colonial powers and from conflicts with Native American tribes. The solution was pulled directly from their collective memory. They built their own beacons. These New World networks were often cruder and more makeshift than the organized chains of Europe. There were no imperial treasuries to fund stone towers here. Instead, local militias took charge, using whatever high ground and materials were available. A prominent hill overlooking a cluster of towns would be designated as a signal station. Watchmen, who were simply the farmers and tradesmen of the community taking their turn, would stockpile dry wood and straw. The signal itself was often a simple, massive bonfire, or a pitch-soaked barrel hoisted high on a pole, its lone flame a stark shout into the immense American night. Despite their rustic nature, these systems served the exact same vital purpose as the Byzantine chains. When a threat was spotted, the fire was lit, and its light would leap from one hill to the next, rallying the militias of a dozen towns in a matter of hours. This adaptation proves something profound about the beacon. It was not a technology that belonged to any one advanced culture. It was a fundamental human response to danger. The need for rapid communication, for that gift of time in the face of a threat, was a universal challenge. The colonists, armed with an ancient idea, built a nervous system for a new civilization, one flickering hilltop fire at a time. The roar of the cannon was the final word spoken by the beacon's fire. Even as gunpowder began to reshape warfare, the ancient signal system did not simply vanish. It adapted, finding a new partnership with the very technology that seemed destined to replace it. Along vulnerable coastlines, a new hybrid warning system emerged. A watchman would first light the traditional beacon fire, its brilliant light racing across the hilltops as it had for centuries. Then, moments later, a thunderous cannon shot would echo from a coastal fort. This was a masterstroke of redundancy. The fire was for the eyes, a silent, swift alert for those with a clear view of the chain. The cannon was for the ears, a sound that could curve around hills, penetrate foggy valleys, and reach villages hidden from the line of sight. Together, they created a multi-sensory alarm that extended the reach of a warning further than ever before. This collaboration between the oldest and the newer military technologies was a testament to the beacon's enduring value. But its days as the fastest messenger were numbered. The true end came not with an explosion, but with a quiet click. The invention of the electrical telegraph in the 19th century delivered the final, silent blow. For the first time in human history, a complex message could be sent instantly as a detailed sentence, not a simple code. This new network was immune to the ancient enemies of fog and rain, and it demanded no line of sight, its wires tunneling through valleys and crossing plains where no fire could ever be seen. The age of the watchman staring into the night was over, replaced by the operator listening to the rhythm of a key. The fire on the hills had finally been outpaced, its long and brilliant service to civilization complete. The word beacon still shines in our language long after the last watchfire cooled. We speak of a lighthouse as a beacon for ships, a radio tower as a beacon for signals, and a nation as a beacon of freedom. This is not a coincidence. The image of that solitary light cutting through the dark has permanently etched itself into our collective mind. It has become a universal shorthand for hope, for warning, and for safe harbor. We have internalized the very essence of the ancient signal fire, transforming a piece of historical technology into a powerful and enduring metaphor. The idea persists because it speaks to a fundamental human need, the desire for guidance when we are lost, for a sign of civilization when we feel alone. This symbolic power is actively celebrated, not just passively remembered. In many countries, great ceremonial beacon lightings mark royal jubilees or national holidays. When those flames are kindled on 1,000 hilltops in a coordinated display, it is more than just a spectacle. It is a conscious act of remembrance, a way for a modern population to physically connect with the ancient rituals of their ancestors. In that shared moment of light, we are momentarily linked to the watchmen of old, reaffirming the same ideals of community and vigilance that the fires once represented. The true legacy of these networks is not just in the silent stones they left behind, but in the living language we speak and the powerful symbols we still hold dear. The fire on the hill taught us how to watch over one another, and that lesson, encoded in light, has never truly gone out. The entire system balanced on a single, fragile principle, a straight line. A beacon's light could not bend or curve. It traveled only where the human eye could see, making the geometry of the landscape its absolute master. This was the science of line-of-sight communication, a brilliant dance with the horizon. To make it work, ancient surveyors performed a remarkable feat of engineering. They had to map out an unbroken chain of vision across dozens, sometimes hundreds of miles of rugged terrain. Each station had to be positioned with meticulous care, ensuring that from its peak, the watchman could clearly see the glow of the previous fire and the next one down the line. This often meant building on the most windswept, inaccessible peaks, not for dramatic effect but for pure mathematical necessity. There was an even more profound constraint shaping this network, the curve of our planet. Even on the clearest day, you cannot see forever because the Earth itself falls away beneath you. This natural limit dictated the maximum possible distance between any two stations. On average, with towers built on high hills, the gap could be around 20 to 30 miles. Push the stations further apart, and the next hill would simply dip below the horizon, vanishing from sight. This invisible wall, created by the planet's own shape, defined the entire architecture of the network, forcing it to be a chain of many close links rather than a few giant leaps. Recognizing these constraints transforms our view of the beacon from a simple bonfire into a sophisticated engineering solution. These builders were not just soldiers stacking stones. They were practical physicists, optimizing their design within the rigid laws of the natural world. They turned the entire landscape into a colossal communication device, proving that long before the age of wires and codes, the most advanced network was built from fire, stone, and a perfect line of sight. This fundamental need to outpace an enemy created strikingly similar solutions in worlds apart. The Byzantine chain was the empire's swift, sharp nerve, a dedicated military line operated by disciplined soldiers whose only duty was to watch and relay. It was a centralized command tool designed for rapid response to a single, overwhelming threat. Far to the east, the Chinese system wove its signals directly into the stone of the Great Wall, making communication a function of the barrier itself. This was a network fused with a static defense, a vast, intelligent perimeter that could not only detect a threat but also diagnose its size and location. Across the scattered kingdoms of medieval Europe, the approach was entirely different. Here, the networks were decentralized, organized by towns and local lords. These were community watch systems, powered not by imperial decree, but by the shared responsibility of villagers protecting their own homes and fields. One was a spear, one was a shield, and one was a neighborhood watch. Yet all three relied on the same simple, brilliant core, a relay of fire across high points. This independent convergence is a powerful testament to a shared human ingenuity. Separated by continents and centuries, these cultures all arrived at the same answer to the same urgent problem. They prove that the drive to protect a community, to gain that precious window of time, is a universal force. That solitary flame on a dark hilltop was not just a signal, it was a declaration of collective will, a spark of civilization against the unknown. A fire on the hill could also announce a celebration. These networks of light were not solely instruments of fear, but also threads of community, capable of weaving a kingdom together in moments of profound peace and change. The very same flame that screamed of invasion could, with a different pattern, solemnly mark the passing of a beloved monarch. The news of a royal death, an event that could destabilize a realm if met with uncertainty, now flew from peak to peak, ensuring a unified, simultaneous moment of mourning and transition from one capital city to the farthest coastal village. Conversely, the joyous birth of a long-awaited heir could be proclaimed, the fires becoming a national celebration, their light a promise of stability and a future secured. Major religious festivals, events that bound a society together in shared ritual, were often inaugurated by a coordinated lighting of the beacon chains. At a predetermined hour, a wave of fire would sweep across the landscape, telling every soul within its view that the holy days had begun, a silent, spectacular call to prayer and feasting. This utility extended into the practical rhythms of daily commerce. In some coastal regions, a specific signal from a headland beacon might indicate that a port was clear of disease or open for a specific trading fleet, allowing merchants to ready their warehouses and ships to set sail without delay. The swift movement of valuable trade goods like spices or silk could be coordinated through these signals, ensuring that caravans were met and markets were prepared. This transformed the beacon from a purely defensive tool into a dynamic part of the economic bloodstream. The network's true value, therefore, lay in its flexibility. It was a general-purpose infrastructure, a national asset as vital as a well-paved road or a deep-water harbor. Its existence meant that the most urgent news, whether a call to arms or a call to prayer, traveled at the same breathtaking speed. Recognizing this dual life of the beacon chains forces us to expand our understanding. They were not just the nervous system of an army, but the nervous system of an entire civilization, carrying the impulses of politics, religion, and commerce with equal urgency. They helped to forge a shared identity, making a vast and disparate collection of towns and provinces feel like a single, connected kingdom. A commander's greatest weapon was once the cloak of secrecy. For thousands of years, an army could materialize from the wilderness, its arrival a thunderclap of chaos that shattered unprepared towns and scattered local garrisons. This single element of strategic surprise decided the fate of empires. The beacon network, in its silent brilliance, tore that cloak to shreds. It turned the slow, invisible approach of an invading force into a public spectacle, a wave of light announcing their every move long before their dust cloud was even visible. The defender was no longer a victim waiting to be struck. With a gift of hours or even days, they became a planner, a strategist who could choose the ground, concentrate their forces, and turn their own territory into a prepared killing field. The entire dynamic of invasion was inverted. The aggressor, who once held the initiative, now marched into a trap they themselves had triggered. This fundamental shift forced a brutal evolution in military tactics. If you could not arrive unseen, you had to arrive prepared for a siege. The emphasis moved from lightning raids to the slow, grinding science of undermining walls and starving out defenders. Deception became paramount. An invading general might attempt feints, sending a small diversionary force to trigger the beacons in one valley, while his main army swept through an unguarded pass miles away. Or he would watch the skies, waiting for the shroud of fog or the lash of rain that would blind the watchtowers, granting him a few precious hours of anonymity. The very existence of these fires on the hills did more than send messages. It dictated the terms of war itself, forcing armies to become slower, smarter, and more cunning, all because a solitary flame on a distant peak had stolen their greatest advantage. From the hilltops of ancient empires to the pages of legend, these chains of fire stand as a profound testament to human ingenuity. They were our first high-speed network, a brilliant solution forged in the face of existential threats. We have traced their journey from a solitary spark of an idea to the intricate engineering of the Byzantine and Chinese systems, from the lonely vigil of the Watchmen to the shared responsibility of entire communities. We have seen how a simple flame could dictate the fate of armies and shape the very strategies of war, moving messages with a speed that no force on the march could ever hope to match. More than just an early warning system, these beacons were the swift, beating heart of a nation's defense, a technology that bound distant lands together with a single, urgent pulse of light. But beyond the stone towers and the coded signals, Their true legacy is the timeless human drive they represent, the unyielding need to connect, to protect, and to shout across the darkness to one another. This remarkable chapter in communication history is a powerful reminder that our greatest tools are often born from our most fundamental needs. If this exploration of light and message has illuminated the past for you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. For more journeys into the shadows of history, be sure to subscribe.